All right, welcome. Welcome everyone to the Bellevue School District regular board meeting. School board directors are meeting today on Thursday, December 2nd, 2021. We'll begin with roll call. I'm Francine Wiest.
Carolyn Watson.
Christine Chu.
Erica Malie.
Seema Serafan.
Art Jarvis, interim superintendent.
Thank you. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a senior from Interlake High School joining us, Megan's son. Megan, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Of course. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And the land acknowledgement?
We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Duwamish and Snoqualmie tribes. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. We reflect on the historic context that brings us to reside on this land and accept responsibility to interrupt erasure. We commit to an ongoing partnership with the Snoqualmie tribe as we listen to, learn from, and lead with their guidance.
Thank you. Now we move to item 1.4, which is approval of the agenda. There's a slight modification to the overall agenda from our usual because it is the annual organizational meeting. Yes.
I'd like to request that the approval of agenda be done after the new members are sworn in, so the folks who are participating in the meeting tonight will have the chance to approve the agenda.
We need to approve the agenda because it includes the annual organizational meeting. And so we cannot proceed without that. So at that time.
Technically you can proceed. Like technically it says that the first thing on the agenda is supposed to be the election of the swearing in and then the election of officers. So you've already changed that. So I'm just asking for this approval of agenda to be done once the new members are sworn in.
Well, I was going to ask as part of this to just say about the executive session and point out that we have that. And I guess what I wanted to say is we might need it at two different points, possibly. So I wanted to check that out with everybody as we approve this agenda. And that would be before people are elected. So I need to say it now.
Sworn in or elected? But not before.
Oh, you mean sworn in, sworn
before
in.
They're sworn in.
Right. Yeah.
So my proposal would be that we approve the agenda as is. And then similar to at the last meeting, if there's an additional request, given the situation, that a motion could be made and seconded with a request to either add or move something on the agenda at that time. And then that would go before the current meeting chair.
Okay.
So I'm going to move that we approve the agenda as written.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the agenda stands approved. And that brings us to item 1.5, student update. Megan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan's son. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior at Interlake High School. I've been in BSD all my life. I went to middle school at Highland and then elementary school at Sherwood Forest, where my mom is actually a teacher. I'm beyond thankful for my time in this district. I've had teachers in all the schools that I've been in that have completely changed my life. And I've been a part of extracurriculars that have really pushed me to be an activist and change maker. And my ultimate goal is that I can just give back to this community that I love so much and be an advocate for myself and my peers, especially my peers of color, and also be an advocate for equity and justice. So a little bit more about me and what I do. So I'm currently involved in the BSD Superintendent Advisory Committee. So if you don't know what that is, we basically work to make recommendations on budgeting and spending to the superintendent. So we've recently been looking at ways to create environments in which students are empowered to become creators of their future worlds. So I've had super good discussions with district staff, parents, and volunteers about mental health, curriculum, student and staff relationships, everything. So my ultimate hope is that I can be a voice to the community and be a voice of my friends at Interlake and my peers, and inspire more opportunities that allow student engagement in district decision making. So some other things that I'm a part of, I'm involved in Key Club at my school. So I just found out that a grant proposal that my friends and I created was approved to create safety kits for Asian elders. So we're going to start work on that like this week. So I'm super excited about that. I'm an intern with the Seattle MLK Organizing Coalition. So this is a coalition that's been going on for, I think, over 40 years now. And it's an opportunity that was recommended to me by my school's college and career counselor. So I'm super thankful that that was brought to my attention. We've been planning youth panels, workshops, and a city march to honor the legacy of Martin Luther King and fight for the issues he cared about. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you guys, I'm involved with Eastside for Black Lives. Our main focus has been on policing in schools. So we've been working with the district, with senators, with the BPD, and of course other students to discuss those issues and what that will look like moving forward. We've organized rallies and community celebrations. I personally create informational graphics for the social media pages. So ultimately, all of these opportunities have helped me grow more into myself and my own identity, but it's also allowed me to give back and uplift others. It's taught me that resistance can look like really anything, and that I'm capable of creating change. My hope is that the students after me are offered all of these same opportunities and more to cultivate their talents towards lasting change. I appreciate the work that you guys are all doing and really encourage you guys to be listeners. I want to encourage you guys to listen to the students in this district that want to feel challenged and safe and prioritized. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Director Watson, do you have a question for our student?
Yeah, it seems like you'd be really well positioned to be able to let us know or advise on when you went back to school after having been out for so long because of COVID, when you transitioned back into in-person learning, is there anything that you and your fellow students can point to or could point to that would have helped more, or that we could do even on an ongoing basis to help more with kids and the challenges of being back in person?
Yeah, absolutely. So my feelings transitioning back from this pandemic world and being back in person, I felt like there was this big rush of, oh, we missed so much school. We have to just quickly transition back to normal, right? I've been hearing the word normal come up a lot from not just from students, parents, and staff. And the reality is we are still very much in this situation, and normal is not going to look anything like it did 1 or 2 years ago moving forward, right? So we need to redefine what normal looks like. And I think there's this pressure on students to transition faster and quicker. And, you know, I think it's just not really realistic. So I think just showing more empathy to students and kind of working together to redefine what normal is going to look like.
Thank you. So redefine normal, try to alleviate some of the pressure and display more empathy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. We appreciate hearing directly from students. You're certainly welcome to stay, but we know that you're very busy, and so we also understand if you need to leave the meeting. So thank you again. And that brings us to acknowledgements. We have a list there that I think is on the screen. I want to call out a couple that are happening this week. So today, Special Education Day, and we are deeply, deeply appreciative of our special education staff, and certainly an area that the district invests in heavily. We are greatly underfunded by tens of millions of dollars from the state in terms of the special education services that we believe our students deserve and require, and that is an extra area that the district invests in and is funded by our levies. We have a levy coming up in February. It's a renewal of our existing levies, and so therefore critical when we look at things like special education in order to be able to continue to fund and provide the services for our students. And I also want to point out that tomorrow's International Day of People with Disabilities. Every year there's a theme, and this year's theme is leadership and participation of persons with disabilities toward an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. And you can see there's other ones there, and we like to acknowledge all of them. Now we'll have comments from our departing board directors. Director Malif, would you like to say a few words?
As is my habit, I will keep it short. I just wanted to say thank you to all the district staff, to our deputy superintendents, Eva and Melissa, to John, to Jeff, to everyone, all the executive directors of schools who work so hard in our buildings, to our interim superintendent, Art, for all of your hard work over the last 6 months, to our departed superintendent, Ivan Duran, and to all of you, the board directors who continue to serve so well on this board, and our new incoming board directors who will serve our students so well. I was inspired to run for this seat 4.5 years ago when I was alarmed by the tone of national politics, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and I still a lot of the time feel like that. I don't regret it for a second, and I'm going to be around. You can feel free to contact me in any way. I'm not going anywhere. My youngest doesn't even start kindergarten until next year, so I will be here for the long haul, and I look forward to continuing to work with the district and everyone in the community to serve our kids in different ways. So thank you very much for all the time and effort everyone puts in.
Well, thank you so much for all the time and effort you've given us in the district, and I wanted to present you with this token of appreciation from all of the board. The continuing members all were in on it. Seema did most of the legwork, so we'll give her credit, but it is something that I hope you'll remember us by.
Thank you. I'll open
it. Okay.
So for my part, I'll say a school board's role is in governance and oversight of the district, and it's as one entity and not as individual directors. But nevertheless, the service comes from very dedicated volunteers. And as I depart, I'd like to thank my fellow board members. So we have these district value pins. People may have seen them. We give them out, although we seldom receive them. And so while I would gladly bestow all 6 of them on each of you, I will give one as a highlight. So first to Director Watson, who I've had the incredible privilege and honor to be able to serve with you on many committees, and then this past year as on the executive committee as president and vice president. You know that I use the mnemonic, See Us Rise, to remember the values. And so the C is the letter C, and it's for compassion. So you wear your heart on your sleeve, and it's a banner for all of us to know that we need to hold kids and each other in kindness. And so I want to bring that over to you. So thank you. The next part of the mnemonic is us, and that's collaboration, and the R is for respect, and the I is for integrity. And so it's for Director Serafan. I share an integrity pin, and that highlights how you advocate for our district with an intense conviction that it's the right thing to do, at all times and all situations. And I think that strong compass will continue to guide the board and the district going forward. So thank you. And the S is for service, and that is for Director Chu. She has served so many years on the board and really embodies service and gives so much of herself to this endeavor. And finally, the E is for excellence, or for Erica. So for Director Malif, I've heard so often that you were the originator of the phrase in our vision statement, creators of our future world. And so I'd really like to give you a creativity pin, but it's not one we have yet. I think, so here's excellence, and it's for that vision. And that vision statement, that part of it, really resonates with our community. And so as the board embarks on a strategic planning process next year, perhaps creativity will make the list. We can come back and get that pin. I think you mentioned all of the staff, and so I'll just say I've had the pleasure to work closely with many staff over the past years, and I have and will continue to give my thanks privately. While it's an unusual time and we've had to learn a lot on the fly, that adaptation and opportunity to make leaps in progress in education is one that I hope the board and staff will continue to harness. I feel fortunate to be able to continue my service here in the district in a couple of ways going forward. And I'll say also concurrently reclaim time and energy to spend on a variety of other pursuits. So including my family, and I have some projects that will also impact students across states and nationally. I think there are a number of urgent national and global issues that are going to intersect with us here locally, and it takes all of us working together to affect positive outcomes for students. And while there are different beliefs on how to get there, uniting those passions for happy, successful students is what will drive progress. And at the same time, it's critical to have a common understanding of what that progress is, because kids are so incredibly capable. They are capable of so much, and there should be no limits or labels to hold them back. In the enthusiasm to embrace an idea or to resist it, is there an understanding and willingness to understand the issues in different perspectives? Are all things that are done in the name of equity truly equitable? And I believe the Bellevue School District is and will continue to be, for many reasons, a beacon for creating a system that truly works for all students. And I wish you all the best so that the zeal will be directed and redirected to lifting one another up, and that our ecosystem of a district community can listen to one another with good intent, seek to understand, and strive to work together. So thank you all.
I would like to present you with this token of our appreciation from the continuing members of the school board and the district. And I hope you'll display it proudly.
Thank you. Well, I think Director Malif, they're the same, right? So while she's opening it, and we'll show it off to folks, I'm gonna get ready for the next part.
Thank you.
That is really nice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so we as the old board need to approve the minutes from the November 16th meeting. So I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the minutes stand approved. All right, so that brings us to the first main item for the meeting, which is the annual organizational meeting. The welcome and introduction is, welcome everyone to our annual organizational meeting. We are delighted to be swearing in some new directors, and then the new board will proceed to nominate and then elect by roll call vote a president, and then similarly a vice president. And then there are a number of other positions that the board will be able to consider. As a reminder, if you look at the director positions at the last meeting, we did temporarily suspend the provision in the policy regarding committees for committee appointments to happen at this meeting. So that's suspended. It is not on the agenda for today. With that, we will go into swearing in of newly elected board members. And so I turn that over to Dr. Jarvis to begin with Director District 3. Oh, so with Joyce Shuey, and then we are going to do this hybrid and say goodbye to Director Malief.
I'm going to virtually shake your hand, Joyce, and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Joyce Shuey, congratulations on being certified as elected to the position of Director for Bellevue School District. If you would raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Joyce Shuey,
I, Joyce Shuey,
do hereby solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Washington,
and the Constitution of the State of Washington,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of Director of Bellevue School District number 405
and will faithfully discharge the duties of Director of Bellevue School District 405,
King County, State of Washington,
King County, State of Washington,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Joyce Shuey.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And then the next will be to swear in the new director, Jane Aris, for District 5. And so with that, I am also going to hand over the gavel to our Vice President to lead the next part of the meeting.
Jane Aris, would you come
Again,
forward?
thank you all.
Let's do it so everybody can see you. We'll do it this way. Would you raise your right hand? I, Jane Aris,
I, Jane Aris,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Washington,
and the Constitution of State of Washington,
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
of Director of Bellevue School District number 405,
of Director of Bellevue School District 405,
King County, State of Washington,
King County, State of Washington,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Joyce, we're off camera signing some documents.
Okay, just giving Jane a moment to settle.
Great, and in true hybrid fashion, I have also DocuSigned.
Oh, great. Yeah, I thought you would. Okay, so the first meeting in December is always our board organization meeting after the new members are sworn in. So as vice president, I'm going to continue with this piece of the meeting. And the first order of business before the board is the nomination of a president. And I'm going to go ahead and nominate Seema for president. And then I'm going to ask, so let me finish that. Is there a second? Or do you accept, I guess, is really, you don't have to second it.
I do accept.
Okay, and then I would like to take any other nominations for president.
I would like to nominate Christine Chu.
Okay, and do you accept?
Yes, I accept.
Okay, so then what we need to do next is each one of you should have a chance to give a 3-minute statement about why you would be the best one. And I actually meant to bring a coin, which in rushing out of the house, I did not. Oh dear.
There's a left too.
All right. All right. So would you toss the coin for us? Oh, first we have to say who wants heads and who wants tails.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Or do you want to pick?
Heads.
Yeah, it seems like a 50-50 odds.
Okay.
That's heads.
I will go second.
Okay.
Before I make any statement, Carolyn, I'd like to understand a couple things. First, I don't understand that there is a break between election and nomination.
Okay. There is time there in case we need to go into an executive session. We have checked with the legal guidance and it is acceptable for us to discuss this situation, although not to interview people. We don't do that in private. But if there's anything that we need to say amongst ourselves, it's acceptable for us to go into an executive session for a little while. So that's on the agenda, and if nobody feels that we need it, then we won't do it. But if even one person wants it, it's on the agenda, and we'll do it.
Okay, and then the second thing is we had not talked ahead of time as a board about how we were going to structure this time, and I would like to ask for more than 3 minutes per person to make such a major decision about governance for our board.
Okay, so the idea was that we do a 3-minute statement, and I did send out an email letting everyone know so they could compose something. And then if we needed to discuss amongst ourselves, we could go into the executive session. Then we would come back, and if there were any questions that came up that we can't ask in executive session because you don't interview people in executive session, then we would give you time to answer those questions, and then we would vote.
Right, I understand that you asked for the statements, but I think that there's more substance to it than is good to give in 2 to 3 minutes. So I'm asking for additional time.
How many minutes do
for
you want?
statements? I think we could start with maybe 5 minutes or something and then just see where it goes from there.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I think that will have to come to a vote.
Sure.
So how am I going to do this? Can I say all of those? Okay, I move that we keep the 3 minutes in place as we have it, and we'll take a vote on that, and then we can take a vote on 5 minutes after that. So,
Wow.
So does anyone second the 3 minutes?
I'll second the 3 because I do think we have a room full of people who also are here for public comment. And if we can move this forward,
Okay.
I'd like to try the 3 minutes.
So
I would second.
All those in favor of 3 minutes, say aye. And I'm
Aye.
saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed to 3 minutes?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so then the next proposal is 5 minutes?
Sure.
Would you like to move that?
Sure.
Okay, someone seconding?
I'll second that.
Okay, And then all in favor of the 5-minute proposal?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Nay.
all opposed to the 5 minutes?
Nay.
Nay. Did we hear you, Joyce?
Oh, I thought I voted aye.
Okay, all right, so then the ayes have it, and it will be 5 minutes. Okay.
Are we starting now? Okay. So as an officer of this board, I would be fully committed, not only in word, but also in my actions of planning and follow through to the true equity that respects all students, regardless of race, language, disability, income, gender, sexuality, religion, or any other context or attribute. To growth for our students, myself, our board, and our district. To putting students first, not just in word, but in our actual practices, our culture, our policies, and our oversight. And to elevation of voices and greater empowerment of stakeholders through the system. I have constantly
How about if you start over so that you get the full 5 minutes?
We had a way of timing on the screen last time. Can we do that? Yeah, thanks. We'll use the on the screen timer. Okay, we can start.
Okay, thanks. I have constantly reflected on my own steps, missteps, and opportunities and have adjusted and continue to adjust my participation to acknowledge the needs and realities of students, families, staff, and others in this work. I do not avoid situations or feedback that makes me feel uncomfortable, and I focus on the issues at hand and the shared goals of those with whom I collaborate. We have amazing students, educators, and families, and we also have much opportunity and for growth ahead of us. All too often in education, the answer to a struggle or discomfort is to just try something new. We see it in math curriculum, changing every few years to address unmet needs, but it is not the change of materials that provides the solution. It is the thoughtful changes in practice made by those who have the experience to inform the direction they take, and it is the time and commitment to professional development that allows that to succeed. Simply changing something without having that informed by the context and expertise around us is not growth mindset. The systemic issues that keep our kids from accessing and reaching their full potential will not go away simply because we try something new. It is the understanding of the people, the culture of the system, the level of ownership and empowerment distributed across that system that make the changes. For our board, beyond change, we need true growth that builds on past successes and past failures, and that acknowledges its own ownership of, and more importantly, responsibility for the system of our district and all the students and other stakeholders in it. It is not by accident that the recent communication about student protests about the district handling of sexual harassment and misconduct began poorly. Yes, communications were sent out, but those communications did not start with the most important point, that this district is committed to eliminating and addressing issues of sexual harassment and misconduct, and it is. Our value to affirm our students was not lived in the communications we sent because the culture of our system has not shifted from executing transparency in a way that tells what we want to say rather than focusing on what our students, families, and stakeholders need to hear and know. How safe do we expect our student survivors of sexual misconduct to feel when our communications do not start with affirming our commitment to them and to creating a safe space for all? Our board has identified communications as an ongoing issue for our district. We have given feedback to our superintendents, supported large-scale assessments and department restructuring and new hires. But as a board, we have provided less feedback and direction recently around the expectations in this area. We just had a presentation on communications where we asked questions about the plan, but we didn't provide strong collective feedback and direction about the quality of our communications. More information is being shared, but the most critical shift to communicating with empathy and student recipient focus remains missing. We talk about swimming in our lanes as a way that moves more and more towards abdicating our responsibility for governing. We know that policies alone are insufficient for governance. We have critical criteria requirements that have been in effect for multiple years, but we have not enforced that requirement. And so we continue our program changes initiated with insufficient stakeholder engagement, without complete equity considerations, and no equity monitoring. The recent handling of the dual language program is an example of this. Yet, rather than fully taking responsibility for not ensuring our policies were executed with fidelity, we actually wanted to tell our community how that wasn't our fault. Maybe it was not our fault, but the pattern of not executing on that policy is our responsibility, and we need to provide the governance and direction to ensure such things are taken into account and that we have clear shared expectations around what the outcomes of significant investments like communications should include. We have a highly capable superintendent and a strong, experienced director of communications, yet these are still happening. It is our role as a board to provide the supportive and constructive direction to help ensure our superintendent prioritizes and addresses these critical issues. Not to tell him how to do the work, but to agree on the direction and to ensure progress is made. The search for a new superintendent will be important, but we cannot base our governance on finding the perfect unicorn. It is our role to ensure we conduct a search that is deeply and meaningfully informed by the needs and values of our students and other stakeholders. It is equally important that we evolve our governance to operate an effective partnership and support that ensure we are addressing the needs of our community, driving to a clear and shared vision, and keeping our students at the center of our work. I worked hard to ensure that all elements of governance, oversight, responsibility were not removed from our updated reporting and monitoring policy. I have worked hard to bring more voices to the table through listening sessions. I have worked diligently to ensure that equity is not just something we say, but something we do, and that we not limit our attention to equity to addressing deficits of our students and families, but to changing our system so it is more effective for more. I believe deep collaboration builds genuine consensus through stronger understanding and across our board and community. Sometimes we will be uncomfortable in this work, but this is what we have been elected to do, and that is where changes begin. At this critical juncture in our board work, I will ensure that we do not swing the pendulum of change so far from responsible collective governance that we are not able to be impactful as a board. I will ensure that more voices are heard at the table and we adjust back to more consensus. And I will do all of this collaboratively with all of you, and I thank you for your consideration.
Okay, so thank you. Let me start by just saying I want to acknowledge and thank Director Chu for the many years that you have, and I know you will continue to serve as our board, part of our board. You've been a board member for more than 10 years. You've served as president many years and vice president many years over the last 8 or 10 years. And I thank you for that. And I believe that any board, any district, just like our students, are always on a path of constant evolution and a cycle of learning. No board is without standing on top of all the work that preceded them. Every school board member who comes contributes in some way and leaves behind something, and hopefully everyone keeps building on it. It has to be a cycle of continual learning, self-critical evaluation, and progress forward. We're at a critical time in our district. The past years highlighted many challenges. Some were the result of COVID, but some were there and they were revealed and exacerbated by COVID. We also, though, have many opportunities in front of us. We have the opportunity to select, most importantly, a new superintendent through a transparent and public process. If we look at the last year and what we learned from feedback from our community, we know that we were told in direct and indirect ways that our board is often seen as non-transparent and not adequately engaging our community. And that we also, in our best effort to try to improve student outcomes, sometimes get in the way. I believe we have an opportunity to evaluate and reimagine how we function as a board so that we focus on the issues that are critical in front of us, so that we have board meetings that are substantive and deep and actually handle and address some of the hardest questions that in the years I've been on the board so far, which have been 3.5 years, it'll be 4 years this spring, I've never heard us deal with in a public environment. They've been dealt with in committees, and I think we have an opportunity to reimagine how we run our board. Not to say we throw out the work that's been done before. We have to build on it. We would never want to disregard or get rid of the work we've done in the past, but we have to improve. And if we're going to look at others and say you should improve, we should start with ourselves. So I have 3 things I'd like to really focus on. How we focus. Are we really dealing with the key issues We have promised through a really well-revised mission, vision, and values that we would be committed to an education that doesn't just prioritize academics, but also supports students socially and emotionally. But we've never had a conversation in our board about, are we striking the right balance between social emotional support and academics? We've talked about an individualized education that's also one that's equitable. And yet we have programs that sometimes meet individual needs, but do have the unintended consequence of separating students. We've also talked about how, and we've committed to having an education that's rigorous and relevant. So we should look at our curriculum and ask, is our curriculum relevant to the students of today? I hope that we can focus our attention better and reimagine our public meetings in ways that can work in that respect. We can actually be focused if we think about what matters at each year, what do we wish to prioritize and drive to those outcomes. Like all of my board members, I'm committed to student outcomes, but I can't ignore that the student outcomes for the last 5 to 10 years have not improved in ways that we hoped. So we should ask ourselves, as we also ask our district, what can we do to make those changes? And I think the changes start with us. We need to look at how we govern, how we focus, and how we communicate with each other in our board meetings, as well as with our community. So for that reason, I ask for you to consider me as president of the board this year. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you. Okay, so now the next possibility is an executive session to discuss. We will have it as long as, unless the board is unanimous in the sense that we don't need it. So let me see, how will I do this? I'll move that we take the executive session and then we can all vote. Would that make sense? Or do you want to just do an informal poll? Just ask everyone. Does anyone want the executive session?
I do not want, I do not feel that I need it.
Okay.
Let me ask Dr. Chu.
Anybody else?
Will we?
Okay, so hearing that nobody wants the executive session, I'm going to say, let's postpone it. Wait.
I got a question. Will we have time to ask questions to the two candidates?
I didn't really think so. In the executive session, you cannot. Yeah, you could bring up questions. I could make a list and come out and ask them in public. We could do that, or we can just ask them here.
We just ask.
But okay, so we hadn't really foreseen this segment of it. I don't want to take too long with this because we are tight on a deadline.
We have 15 minutes. We had allocated for the executive sessions. I think we could use that 15 minutes here.
All right, so okay. Let me ask again. Is everyone okay with that question and answer period? Okay, and then let's do like a 1-minute timer on each of these, and we'll do one for each candidate, and then if we need a second one.
I actually would like to give them 2 minutes to respond.
All right, we'll do a 2-minute timer. Looks like Mike's got it. Okay, so Jane, your question.
Okay, this is a very generic question, but I'd like to know how you go through this process. We all make mistakes in our life as we work with others. I'd like for you to share a moment where, and this is very specifically because we have such a diverse community here. I'd like to know when you have realized that you have caused or executed a microaggression towards someone else, realized it. What did you do when you realized it?
Okay, the timer was not for the question, but for the answer. All right, do we want to do another coin toss to see who answers first? Or just start? Okay.
Why don't I go first? I can think of something, I mean, I'm trying to think quickly. This was a few years ago, but I want to be sure that I don't indirectly identify the person. But there was somebody with whom I was working who had a disability. And I think I recall sort of trying to almost, in my mind, think that I was accommodating that person and their disability. And I assumed I understood what they needed. And I took actions that I thought were going to be helpful for them. And I kind of got a few steps ahead of all of it. I kind of had already thought that I knew what would be helpful to them. And I kind of planned this out, and it was for a meeting. It was for a meeting they were going to attend. And I thought that I was making an accommodation that was going to be helpful. And what I ended up doing, actually, without realizing it, was I ended up highlighting what felt to them like me highlighting a deficit, where I was actually thinking that I was bringing them in. I think I actually ended up making them feel like less like the other. And it was in the kind of run up to that meeting that I realized I had done it. We all arrived, and what happened afterward was I went to them and explained that I realized kind of how I'd fallen short, and I apologized. They were very gracious about it, but it kind of stayed with me in the sense that I realized kind of what I'd done was I assumed I understood what they needed. I assumed I understood what the solution was, and I projected it and thought that I was doing good, and it really wasn't. So there you have it. I did learn, and it kind of has stayed with me. So
Thank you. Thanks. I don't have as robust of a story to tell. I'll just keep it concise. I think one of the most significant microaggressions I have made is calling a person by another person's name. And they were a person that I had a great deal of respect for. And it was in a place where the person could have taken offense. And I was given so much graciousness in that situation by the person. I corrected, I apologized. There isn't a lot more to do because I didn't want to put it back on that person to then give me the feedback and take the burden off of me. I had earned the right to the discomfort I felt and the embarrassment. And I carried that with me. And it wasn't a hugely public thing, but I just felt like I had done injury to that person. And so I have made a greater effort to be able to say people's names, to look up people's names. And I am still not perfect at it, but I recognize that the burden needs to sometimes be on me and not on someone else. And I think I really appreciated what Seema said, because I think part of the deal is we can't make assumptions. We need to make spaces for others to have their voices speak for themselves. We need to take, like I said, the initiative to be in our own discomfort and to learn from it and to move forward from there. And I think those things are hard to do. They seem easy, but they're actually hard. And I think it's an important thing that guides my work here and that constantly keeps me feeling like I need to learn, I need to step back, I need to reflect, I need to make sure we don't do the same thing twice, because we have made progress. We haven't made zero progress in the years. And I think that, but we have stopped ourselves from making more progress. And so I'm constantly asking myself, what can I do differently? I wonder if there's a place for us to operate differently. What are the spaces where we can be more effective and not making the assumptions? So, thank you.
Now, since Jane got to ask the question, I would like to ask Joyce if she would like to ask the question. We can't hear you somehow.
Thank you for the offer. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't have any questions. Joyce doesn't have any questions.
Well, Seema and I may have questions for each
other. Are we good?
I don't have any questions.
I have a question, and I think that for me, this wasn't something I entered into lightly, and I wasn't intending to do this. So one of the things that I worry about and that I would like to understand better is what it means to build on change and what it means to take an active collective role in governance. So I'd like to understand from Simo what that looks like for you, because I haven't seen the evidence of that. I've seen evidence of kind of leading away from that, but I assume that you have some ideas in your head about what that looks like. So I'd like to understand them.
Okay, I'll start with what you ended with, which is you've seen ideas of me leaning away from it. I think we have a different point of view of what effective governance means. And one of the things that I've been focused on since I came in to the board was trying to understand where the right balance is between oversight and governance, and getting into, I think you used the swim lane analogy when you were speaking, getting into the space of operations. What I believe is that we have to oversee and understand whether our superintendent and all the staff under him are actually meeting the goals that we have outlined, the shared expectations and the goals that we've created together. But where we lapse into operations, we actually hurt our student outcomes. And I've seen the evidence through the last few years, and I've heard from enough principals that some of the ways that we were operating, some of our ways of working, were hurting our student outcomes, even though they were done with the best of intent. So the ways that I think we can change things is through, for example, our meetings, being mindful that when we are having our board meetings, we have the superintendent's full executive staff here. If we can't run a meeting that ends on time, every hour that they are here is hours that the next day they come to work broken and exhausted, and those are fewer emails, fewer problems of students that they are able to address. When we ask for a report and we don't think about, are we going to use that report to drive a decision, or is it to answer our own interest or curiosity, that is going to come at the expense of time that they can spend in service of our students. So it is a balance that I think we have to play.
Are there
I
any
think I
further?
get to answer the question.
What?
I'll go ahead and answer the question.
Oh, okay, yeah, right, sorry.
You're going to answer your question? Okay.
I don't know, like, what else is the process on something like that?
Okay.
It's a little odd that we're so.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't have a question for you. I guess I don't know if you're looking to whatever you want to do, it's fine.
I was asked to, regardless of whether or not I thought I would win this election, I was asked to go ahead with this so that we could have an open discussion about governance. And so I'm trying to facilitate that.
Okay, so on the topic of how would we govern differently, you're saying, like, let's just have a dialogue.
I think that
I
is an
understand.
important
Okay.
conversation topic, and it's not about winning, it's about us. I mean, we're supposed to have a workshop tonight, right, about governing and.
Sorry, totally. I know Joyce can't hear if I don't have anything on.
All right, so as far as governance goes, I think that I couldn't agree more with you about increasing efficiency, and I think that's really important. What I think is also important is that governance isn't just about planning. And what we do in school districts all the time is we plan, and then we go through the motions, and then someone new comes in and they plan, and they go through some new motions. And no wonder that it is so hard to execute change, and why teachers insulate themselves from these things, and why principals do. And I think that part of the problem with some of our goals, first is the sheer volume of how that went down. But the other is the capacity of our system and whether or not we understand. So if those reports are taking so long, there are a couple of things probably going on. One is either the goals that were set were not the right goals. They're not the goals that are driving the work. And so they're bad goals, and they aren't owned by the group. So they need to be owned, and they need to be the right goals for our kids. And then people are monitoring them, and that's easy to report on. Or they are the right goals, and people aren't actually driving to them and prioritizing them. So either of those things should be fixed. And the correct fix is not necessarily to simplify and take away any accountability mechanisms or any oversight governance. So I do believe that there are places for us to give appropriate direction and to acknowledge that we're on the same page or not on the same page. And I see us removing all of those things from our policy work. And so those are the things that I think need to still show up. And we also need to find out how to have governance conversations, not just informational conversations. And we need to differentiate between them. I've done a bit of research about different ways that boards do that and actually deal with the reports and have a governance conversation and a governance outcome afterwards. And I think there's opportunity for us to do that. And I think it's an important thing for us to do. It's not just about hiring the right people. We have good people. We've always had good people. We need to do the governance work that we're here to support so that those people have the right direction.
So I'll take, if it's okay, 1 minute. We're not going to go 2 and 2 because we'll never end. But I think a couple of things. First, I think what you're touching on all makes sense because it means it's really in furtherance of reimagining how we govern. So I don't disagree with you. I think it goes to we can constantly improve. I don't think this is about efficiency, though. I would say this is about student outcomes. And more than one principal has said, I spend time writing reports for your board and I'm not clear what you do with it, but I can tell you what I lose. I lose the chance to meet with students. I lose the chance to talk to teachers. I lose the chance to make sure my kids are doing and learning. And so I think when we hear that, we can not like it for a few seconds, but then we have to get over, well, what are we doing with those reports? So I think it's an opportunity to say everything that's not right is not always someone else's fault. Sometimes it's ours, and we have to look at what we're doing. What can we do differently? It is not a criticism of a person or a system. It's a need to change, only because some of what we were doing might have worked 5 years ago. It might have been the right thing at that time. It might have been the right thing 3 years ago. Sometimes it's just the need comes along because things are changing. And that's really what I'm suggesting. So, but it's not a, let's just be faster. Let's give up governance or oversight. That is not the goal.
Yeah.
It is better governance.
Agreed.
For
and
better
I don't
outcomes.
think, like, just to be clear, there's nothing that I'm advocating that is about keeping doing what we're doing. What we did 5 years ago is different than what we did 3 years ago, and we're constantly evolving. And the real thing is, just like we ask of our district, we as a board need to evolve into a place that's effective so that the governance that we do is more than a big hammer, that the governance that we do is the supportive type of governance and feedback and direction setting system that is part of the flow of the work. And that doesn't come down to the, well, we'll just kind of save it up for the big review or for the contract renewal decisions. Or so, like, there are pieces of governance that can be infused as we go. And I think that we need to do that, and we need to learn to have those discussions more effectively than we have in the past. And I think that will make a bigger difference. And so that is something that I think we need to commit to in how we structure our conversations and our meetings and our policies.
I am aware of the fact that our superintendent update was scheduled for 5:20 and public comment at 5:35. So unless it's vitally important to somebody, I would like to just kind of call the vote. Is that okay? All right. So we're going to do a roll call vote, which is going to challenge me to remember.
So sorry, don't know how to ask, but will we have an opportunity to make any statements?
Oh, we are uncharted territory here. I think not. I think that the candidates.
I'm not hearing the room, so.
I want to take. I'm trying to follow Robert's rules here, and I'm a little bit adrift. So I wasn't.
I'm not sure how to ask the question.
Discussion. So if
Yeah,
I think
okay.
if each new board member wants to make a statement, then maybe we just try
Sure.
to adhere to a time. Joyce?
Oh, are you asking me to make a statement?
Yeah, we've decided in a friendly, collegial way that it's okay.
All right, thanks. And are you voting at the same time? Because my statement is related to my vote, so.
Oh, well, I was planning to do a roll call vote, and I'm just struggling to put you all in alphabetical order. I could, but that's the plan. So do you want to make your statement? I would assume you'd make it before we all voted.
Sure, I can make the statement before we all vote. And I thank you. I want to say that what has happened this evening in terms of our discussion, what has happened over the last year as Jamie and I were running along with 5 other candidates, is that we had 7 people run for the school board, and we now have 2 exceptionally qualified, competent, and committed board directors who are running for the presidency. So I think this is a really important moment to celebrate. I want to also say for the record that I have deeply admired Dr. Chu's nuance and deep understanding and the complexities of equity, and her impassioned and uncompromised commitment to equity. She has her PhD in education. She was a key architect and instrumental in passing the district's very important equity policy, which I highly support. Even tonight, on multiple occasions, including in tonight, Dr. Chu has been setting the bar high, making sure that we have process and that we have fairness in even, every single discussion like this one. Also, her commitment to data and holding people accountable are things that I really, really admire. And then Seema is also highly accomplished, and she's been an attorney at Microsoft for several years and had an illustrious career in as a lawyer, and has also helped establish a program for children who may have been impacted or who were impacted by the potential of an immigration raid. So I want to say for the record, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity, that we have 2 very, very, very highly qualified people, and we are very lucky as a community to have this. I also want to say that the peers, the people I've gotten to know, the alumni that, in Francine and Erica and several other board members that we'll have access to, that we have a very strong community of people who are respectful and empathetic. And I feel in some ways that although this is a really important decision, that it is one that we are very lucky to have, of being able to choose between 2 very qualified people who have had long service to the community. And so in this context, I will be making my vote on, and I don't know if I should I stop there okay, let me say one last thing, is just that for my commitment to equity, one thing that does really matter to me when we have 2 highly competent people who have both provided service to the community and will still both be on the board, is that I do consider it important to vote for, to provide voice to someone who hasn't had that voice before. So I will not vote, but I will say that.
Okay, so now I would like to move on to a roll call vote, and I've managed to. Is that okay, Christine? Oh, because I was about to call on Jane. You want to make another comment?
Well, I guess I could do that. I just want to say thank you both to Seema and Christine for stepping up to be in this position. Being a new board, I obviously are heavily relying on those who are here already to help lead the way and educate us newbies. So I appreciate your willingness to step up to this plate. I know, especially this year being the challenging year it is. I do see that you both have significant value to bring to the chair. I appreciate the time you took to answer our questions and inform us. With that, let's go ahead and make the.
Okay, so now we're going to do the roll call vote, and I'm going to go by last name. So that means with Jane's last name beginning with A, she will be the first person to vote.
I vote for Christine.
Okay. Second person to vote will be Christine.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say thank you for entertaining this. Like I said, I was asked to go through this regardless of whether or not I thought it was going to turn out in a certain way, because I think the conversation was important, and it was important to have in public and not in a closed door room, which I have no idea why that was on the agenda or why we agreed to that. So I'm grateful for that. I will vote for myself, but I would just like to say, Seema, I think you'll do great.
Well, it was just a possibility that we did, check out with the lawyers just in case, but okay. And we weren't going to make any decisions in private, though. Just if we wanted to say, I don't know, unpleasant things about each other. All right, I'm not allowed to joke. Okay. So the next person to vote will be Seema.
So I will just say right back, yes, I think Christine and I were aligned that regardless of what happened, we should do this in public. And that was what I think both of us felt we needed to start to change, was more things in public, more transparency, more clarity. And actually that I think everybody feels that it's a positive thing, as Joyce said, that we have more than one person who's jumping up and down to want to be board chair. And so with all that, yes, I vote for myself. Thank you.
Okay, and then in alphabetical order, the next person to vote will be Joyce.
With great difficulty, but with great reflection, and for the reasons I said before, I vote for Seema.
Okay, and as the last person to vote, that's me with the W, and I vote for Seema. So I believe that Seema has won the election. And therefore, I will, at this point, pass you the ceremonial gavel here and let you run the part where we go for Vice President.
Let me start by saying thank you. And notably, thank you to Christine. I just call you Christine and not Dr. Chu here because I consider you a friend. And we've had many years together, many conversations together. And so thank you for allowing this to be a positive and productive session from which we can all learn and bring everybody else with us. So thank you. I know that we are short of time. So next on our agenda, 2.7, is our nominations for Vice President. And this is also going to be by roll call vote. Let me start by just saying if there's any nominations for Vice President, this is the time to make them. I will start by nominating Carolyn Watson and ask Carolyn if you accept and second my nomination.
I will accept.
Okay.
I would like to nominate Christine Chu. Sorry, I think my mic was off. Sure, I'll accept that.
Okay, so in the interests of time, do we want to have a statement from each person, and should we do a coin toss or something else?
I would benefit from a statement.
Okay, who would like to go first? Christine, how about if you go, would you like to go first or? Okay, all right.
Okay, everybody. You want to put the timer up? Yeah, how much time?
I'm going to suggest.
Yeah, well, I didn't actually polish up a speech, so I just have a few points I want to make. So
I'm going to suggest 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you think you need more than that, why don't we, when we get to the 2 minutes, we can always revisit. Okay, all right, so.
What I would bring to the position is continuity from the last version of the executive committee. We had some different changes, and some of them are really valuable. Like in particular, we had these wonderful agenda planning meetings where we collaborated with staff about what kinds of things we'd be talking about at the school board, and different other changes that were made that I would like to bring forward and offer that sense of stability to the school board and to the community at large. I would see my role as vice president as always trying to support and enhance the president's work, and I'd like to just kind of bring that stability so that we can just focus on the kids. And I want to say that I really, we evolve over time, and I think we've evolved a little bit in the last year or so, and I would like to continue that evolution, and I don't want us to move backwards at all, but although we will be bringing, new thoughts and new ideas forward, and I think it's really valuable to have those new ideas and to support them. And the other thing is, I absolutely was privileged to be one of the people who helped with the equity policy and went around and met with everybody and helped draft that. I've been through every word of that policy many times over with Christine. So I just want to say that to allay the fear that I am not letting that drop, whether I'm going to be vice president or just another board member, that is very important to me, that everything in there carries forward, particularly some of those very specific commitments that we made to the community that we seem to sometimes take our eyes off of around curriculum and hiring and concrete things.
Okay, so that takes us to Christine.
Perfect timing.
Okay, all right, so let's start.
All right, so I was not going to accept this nomination if it was offered to me. But after thinking and talking and listening to things, I think one of the most important things to me, in order to make sure that our focus stays on students, everyone has a commitment to students, but is our focus on students? Everyone who was working on different things in our district that have worked or not worked care about students. There are very few people in this district that don't care about it, but focusing on students first is a different thing. And having the balance there to do that and really ensuring that we do so not just with an empathy and a care, but by elevating the voices of others and making sure that that informs our work, by committing to equitable practices, and by really getting greater participation across the board. One of the things that I did notice in the last year with our board is that there was a trend to more executive decision making that was less inclined to be distributed across the board. And so I felt that the voices weren't heard in the same way that they maybe could have been. That said, I don't think going backwards is a solution either. I think it's a forward solution. And I think that it would be good for there to be some balance in terms of how we set agendas and things in ways that kind of respect progress and new ideas and new thinking, and also make sure that they keep the board fully engaged in the work and that we are truly student-centric in our thinking. So those are the things that I think I could bring, and I'll just stop there.
Okay, so let me ask Joyce and Jane, do you want to have any questions for the vice president candidates?
I guess I'm not sure what order this is supposed to go in, but I'll just say, and then you can tell me if I'm speaking out of order, but I feel less prepared to be making this decision, in part because I have spent some time trying to get to know candidates who I thought would be the candidates for presidency and for president, but I don't feel as prepared for this vote. So I'm not sure what that means. I could ask questions, but having a 1-minute question and 1-minute answer feels inadequate.
I will go ahead and ask a question. So I'll ask this of Christine. So I guess I have 2 questions, and you can maybe take them together or out of order. One is, you've been board president, I think at least 5 times, 4 times at least I've counted, and vice president, and each time it's been multiple years. So do you believe that, what is your view of letting, like in this case, Carolyn have a second year as vice president? Because I noticed you've done vice president usually 2 years in a row and president 2 years in a row. Why not have Carolyn continue a second year? And you mentioned student focused, and I'm wondering if do you believe that you would be more so than Carolyn? And if so, why?
Thanks. So I do believe that folks should have multiple years to work on things. And I believe that Carolyn has been vice president in the past and has done this. This isn't her first term in that role. So
no, but she's only had 1 year right now. This would be a second year if she does it again.
In a row.
Year in a row. Yeah.
But I also think that there are some major shifts that are happening right now. And so I think that those shifts, like I said, like in education, it's very common for there to be a pendulum change when things aren't going the way that we want. We just try something new and we shift over. And I think that change and evolution is critical. Couldn't agree more. But how we go about that change and how we take things into account and whether or not that we retain things, I think is important. And some of the things that I have heard as far as being able to take responsibility for our role and our power, like the potential that we have to impact the system, I feel like I am in a position to use my experience to ensure that that is not lost. And so that's why I would like to have that opportunity. I also, what was the second question?
I kind of heard you suggest that student outcomes or student focus, you thought you would be more so than Carolyn.
Yeah, I think that Carolyn cares deeply about students. As Francine pointed out tonight, her emotion and her commitment and caring about students is deep. And so I don't think it's a question about whether or not people care. It's a question about whether or not there are effective ways to actually affect change for students. And I think that the experience that I could bring to that and the fact that I bring a slightly different way of looking at things than you do might actually add to our ability to plan agendas that are more balanced and that give opportunity and voice to more board directors, but also to more of the community. So that is my thinking.
Okay, so let me ask the same question, I think, of Carolyn, just for I guess, opportunity to address the same thing. Having served a year as vice president, there has been a precedent of, 2 years in a row of president or 2 years in a row of vice president. You've served one as vice president. This would be your second. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on being student focused? And I'll let you answer in any order.
Well, I think that in order for us to keep our focus on the students, you have to start the timer. Hello?
Mike?
Timer.
Could you start the timer?
We got to have good working relationships. And I think, quite honestly, I think that I would have a better working relationship with our new president. Because if we're fighting amongst, not fighting, that's not the right word, but if we're not able to work together really well, we're not going to get anywhere. And my vision when I was vice president for Francine was to try to be really supportive of some of the things that she wanted to do, unless obviously if I really thought they weren't right, I would tell her. And we did have some arguments, it's true. But so I envisioned doing the same thing with SEMA, and that means that things would probably go a bit smoother. And because things would go a bit smoother, we would be able to make more progress for the students and not be just caught up in what was going on between us. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the main point.
So I'm going to say, Jane, do you have any questions? Because if you do, let's go ahead and take those two.
So when you say working relationship between the two of you as a vice president and president, what does the rest of us, how are you putting the rest of us in that category?
Because well, I hope we'll all have a good working relationship. Actually, I will say that I felt that I always worked really well with Christine. Christine was always good for me to work with, but I think that based on what I've understood is that I would be a better vice president for SEMA, because there'd be, I mean, less disagreement. I do believe in the sort of team of rivals concept where, we shouldn't all agree all the time because it makes us stronger. But I just think that things would be a little smoother sailing if I were SEMA's vice president. And I'm definitely sensitive to the notion of keeping everybody looped in. To the extent we can under OPMA.
Can I ask both SEMA and Carolyn, explain to me what your role is as president and as vice president? Well, how do you see those two roles?
That has evolved a bit because when I was Christine's vice president, I didn't do very much, to be honest, because I wasn't called on to do very much. But Francine made me work, for better or for worse. And so what was great about that was I got more insight into, you know, how things, the planning process for the school board, which is it's kind of an administrative function, but it's very important to see how things are going to go and the sequence of events and what the board calendar is going to look like and sort of that. And then I also supported her by trying to take on bits of what you might consider the president's job so that it would be more manageable. So that's why I wound up doing the workshops, and it's why I wound up taking the equity policy thing. It has a review report that's kind of pointed at the president, and I was able to take that on. So that kind of thing.
Are you asking me and Carolyn, or did you want Seema to?
Yeah, I don't think I addressed her question as vice president. So I think if you're asking a question of the vice president candidates, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that the last year, there were a lot of things that happened that shifted, potentially, you know, with COVID and transitions and a lot of things going on, where there was more done and taken on by the executive committee outside of the board. And I think that was one of the committees that I think actually resulted in there being less distribution of information and less participation in the governance work that was done. And there were more things that were kind of prefabricated so that the decisions were not as fluid when it was time for the board to be able to participate. And so, yeah, I think that benefits the vice president if it's handled that way, because that's one more person who's deeply involved in the setting of agendas. But there are other options to do that in ways that are I think less heavy for the two executive officers to take on, and that are more involving of the board and that are important to do that way for that purpose. And I think that one of the things we ought to be doing is setting some priorities for our board. We used to do that, and that sort of went away. And I think we ought to bring it back and then establish like how we're going to distribute ownership of the priorities that we have as a board, whether it be through a committee structure or assignments. But I think the default to executive committee is a mistake. And I think that we should adjust on that particular front.
I would just, though, make one comment on that. I would say that the first year I was on the board, Lynn was president and you were vice president. And I think in that duration of about 6 to 8 months, there was a tension, and it was challenging to be a board member and watch the tension. I would say then you were president and for the next 2 years, and I don't remember who was vice president under you. I think it was Carolyn, and then Francine. And then this last year, it was Francine and Carolyn as vice president. I would say that I actually didn't have the same reaction you had, which was that this last year was most exact. I felt this last year I had the most visibility and engagement, and I thought our discussions were still not where I thought they should be in terms of depth, but I thought we got much better with how we were using our time in terms of being able to talk about the hard questions. So I had the most insight into what was going on this last year. I had no idea, for example, when you were president, how much staff was getting reports sent back to them, and with pages and pages of comments that we didn't have visibility to. So, and I thought you were doing all that, I learned later, with the best of intent, but I didn't know I didn't know the degree of that. So I would say, from at least the perspective of one board member, I didn't have that same view that you have, which was that the last year was very executive and the years before were very transparent. I had the reverse experience. So that might be just a perspective, or when you're on the outside and you're not in that president role, how you might, observe it. But for me, I had a different takeaway than you did. So I just wanted to share that. I would say at this point, if there are more questions, let's hear them. If there's not, if somebody wants to make a statement in support, let's do that. But otherwise, I would ask that we move on, because we have a room full of people who who are here for public comment.
I actually would like for Christine to respond to your comment because your comment was very directed to her.
Okay.
So if you.
I wanted to add one thing too.
Especially regarding transparency component. And the, because I've heard about this report issue multiple times now. And my understanding is that the reports were sent back because it wasn't within in compliance. And so am I understanding that correctly or?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that, but Carolyn said she wanted to say one more thing and I don't know what the protocol here is, but we're just having a discussion, so we should have it.
We were talking about the executive committee doing things, and one thing we did mostly was agenda planning. But you know, when going back when you were president and when Steve was president before you, we used to do a lot of agenda planning in our meeting, which really in this meeting, and that really extended the meeting and was actually quite tedious for all onlookers because it was sort of like, do you want this report on the 20th or on the 20, you know, the next meeting after? And so we don't want to go back to that for sure.
Okay. All right. So I think it's good that some of these things came up. It's challenging sometimes to have these discussions because the framework seems personalized and finger pointing, but it's okay because it's stuff that's there and we should talk about it. The first thing I'd say is that the initial thing was that those reports were published to all board members and board directors weren't reviewing them in time, and they were, you know, frankly, in some ways just too much, and that they were coming back and they were not in compliance. And so at a certain point, the board had actually asked that I go ahead and review them. So I did that, and I, in retrospect, wished that I had not done that in the way that I did it. I tried to be helpful. I was asked over and over again, do what you can to help, do what you can to help. If it's not, you know, if we don't have it working, do everything you can. So I did those things. And if I had it to do over, I would kind of leave it so that we would see where the capacity of our district was a little faster, and we would adjust our policy a little faster so that it was a more supportive approach to keeping with the capacity of the district. And so that wasn't about visibility. That was literally about the fact that no one was, like, for the first several times they came out, no one was actually reviewing the reports. So then they were getting reviewed and comments were sent. So, and obviously lots to evolve there. Also, I think one of the things that came out of a multi-year process was setting an annual board calendar. And that setting of the annual board calendar, when it's done systematically and it's comprehensive, gives us a way of managing a board calendar that doesn't require a lot of in-meeting discussion about what goes on the calendar, and it doesn't require a large, heavy planning meeting either. The planning meetings are much lighter weight because it's predictable what's going on it. It's not ad hoc. It's actually aligned to the goals or to the chart of reports or whatever it is that we want to align it to in our priorities. And that is a much more efficient way of doing things. And I think that that is something that is the next step in evolution for us. We've swung kind of around and about, and I think there's another step that can be taken that would be super productive and transparent and inclusive, but less inefficient. So that's what I would comment. Did that answer your questions, Jane? Yes. Thank you.
I do have a request. When we do the voting, we do it in reverse alphabetic order.
Okay, so are we ready to take a vote? I'm going to look at Jane and Joyce and ask, are you ready for the vote? Can you unmute?
Yes, sorry about that. Ready for the vote.
All right, so we will do a similar vote where we are going to go reverse alpha, and we will each say the name of the person that we wish to have as vice president. So I will start with Carolyn Watson.
Yes, so I'm voting for myself.
Okay, next will be Joyce Hsu.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, next will be me. I'm going to vote for Carolyn. Next is Christine.
I'll vote for myself.
I'll vote for Christine.
Okay, so I will probably suggest that there is a Robert's Rules of Order that I believe in this situation where there is a 2-2. I think I know the answer of what's to be done. I'm going to ask that we hold this in abeyance and we move forward with the rest of our agenda so that we don't hold everybody else up while I determine if I have the right path for what is compliant. If we move on to what's next on our agenda, we have, I'm going to ask our directors, I'm going to make a motion and ask if you would agree that we skip to number 5 on our agenda, that we move to public comment. And yeah, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, so at this time, we will move to public comment. I know that we have 12 people. We normally don't have time to hear all 12 people and 2 minutes each. But in light of the fact that you have all waited so patiently, I'm going to propose, and I'm just asked by unanimous consent if you would nod your heads if you're in agreement. I'm going to propose that we try to shave down the time to 1.5 minutes as best we can per person so that each person who's waited here patiently has a chance to talk. We have put up a visual calendar and we're going to ask you, Ms. Gasparich has your names and will be letting us know by projecting your names the order that you will each come up and speak. I'm going to quickly read something. I'll make it fast. If you don't mind, just listen, please. Our board is very grateful to you to receive your public comment, and we appreciate the thoughtful input of our community. Because of the limitations of our calendar, we normally limit the entire public comment time to 10 minutes per meeting. So please limit your remarks tonight to no more than 1.5 minutes. And to maximize the opportunity for all of you to speak, we're going to ask you to just make the statement that you can and use as little of the time as you can. We will be not responding to your comments, but we do listen to them, meaning you may make a question within your comment. Please don't expect us to answer because we typically are listening and we are not responding in the moment. So I, as the meeting chair, might interrupt you to ensure that we are adhering to a standard of civility that we expect for ourselves as well as anybody who attends our meetings. So an example of an uncivil comment would be a comment that is libelous or slanderous, that is an invasion of privacy, that's obscene or indecent, that violates our school district policy or procedure regarding harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discrimination, or that is an incitement to an unlawful act on a school premise or violates a lawful school regulation, or that creates a material or substantial disruption to the orderly conduct of our business as a board. So in entirety, it is please respect each other and our board as you come up and speak. So with that, let's go ahead and start our public comment, and we will have a visual timer for you to look. Could I ask you, Mike, to make that to 1.5 minutes rather than 1 minute 30 seconds rather than 2 minutes? Thank you. Okay. We're going to start with Joel Ingram, and then if the people who can see your names, if you can just kind of be queued up and then be ready to take on. Thank you.
My name is Joel Ingraham, and tonight I'd like to talk about open enrollment for choice schools and how that affects kindergarten families. Last year during COVID, the deadline was moved up to January 15th. That was the earliest that has been. Going back to 2013, we had an outside date of March 1st, and then we progressed the most recent 17, 18, 19. We were between February 1st and February 10th. Every day that we move away from September 1st makes it harder for families to enroll in these programs. This affects Puesta, the dual language programs, and Jingmei. For those who are not here in the district who are not yet aware of these programs, I would like to see how the district can work together to market them in every possible way and give everybody in our district an equal chance of being able to participate in these programs. especially for the dual language. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Lisa Marshall Spitzart. I probably misstated that, sorry.
Yeah, hi. I'm a paraeducator currently at Tyee Middle School. Worked in the district for around 14 years. First of all, I want to thank the district. We've raised 2 sons in the district. Wonderful experience. We are so thankful for what a great education they had. I'm coming today to speak about 2 concerns. First one being, there are serious behavioral challenges, as we all know, with the special ed students, especially the last 4 to 5 years. We're seeing a lot more physical aggression, extreme social emotional needs. What I am urgently asking the district is please prioritize the necessity for training for the staff and also resources to meet the student needs. We've had, administrators, special ed teachers and such request these resources so that we really can meet the student needs. Secondly, I promised several paraeducators at Tyee and at some other schools, there has been some unfair hiring practices in our paraeducator positions. And the way we have the highest level of a paraeducator is called the behavior paraeducator 4 position. And there's been some really unfair hiring practices with that, and also unfair practices in the way that that position is utilized. Many paras wanted me to, on their behalf, express how, basically, if I could just quickly say that the position is making a higher wage than the rest of us have worked in the district for over 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
So let me just clarify that I am trying to make sure that Joyce can see the camera, so that's why I'm holding this up.
I did see that. Thank you. And I was trying to text her to say, we will see if we can find a way to get that resolved for next time.
So thank you. I think that Mike was helping and pushed it over so I could see the speaker, and then it came back. So if whatever was there 5 minutes ago would be awesome. Thank you.
So could we have, I'm having a hard time seeing the screen. Oh, is it Ellie Mermelstein? Following her, Julie Mermelstein, if you're making a statement together or separately, yeah, great, thank you.
I'm going to give Ellie part of my time because she has a 2-minute thing.
Okay, that sounds great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ellie Mermelstein, and I'm a past student of the Bellevue School District. I'm here to give my support to the students and share some of my experiences. I know there are a lot of good people in this district that I worked with and that have helped me, but I had troubles with Yehudi. Once she physically grabbed me by the arm and dragged me by it all the way to my locker to get a sweater for a dress code violation. My parents and I still went to Yehudi when I was being bullied though, but all she told my mom was, well, what can I do? So we filed my case as bullying with the district and asked them to let me switch schools. My case was denied. They said it fell under harassment and not bullying. Did you know when they do that, they can refuse to let you switch schools because it's just harassment? Maybe this has changed. My parents had to pull me out of school altogether because a therapist said it wasn't safe for me to be there, and the district still wouldn't let me switch schools. I was out of school for months until my mom went to the superintendent and had me transferred. When I got to high school, I had Scott Powers as a principal with O'Connor under him. Scott asked me once to come with him to his office, and when I asked why, because I was uncomfortable and scared to go with him, not knowing why, he refused to tell me. When I tried to go home, he ran and physically threw his body on the main door to the school to try and stop me from leaving. I was too scared to go back to school after that. No child should ever have to be scared to go to school for any reason. The adults who choose to be in the power position around your children should be there to protect them, not create fear and perpetuate unsafety. It is a fundamental right for your children to get an education, and you help take that away anytime you employ and keep employed abusive adults who create fear. There are many reasons I was never able to get an education and had to drop out of the Bellevue School District. But my experience with the adults working as teachers and principals is a big reason why. Something needs to change. Please listen to your children and the children in the district and protect them. That is your job, and that should be the job of the people you hire.
Hi, I'm Julie Mermelstein.
We need to,
Oh, you
you
need
gave
to call
away
me?
some of your time, so we're going to just scale that to 1 minute if that's okay, and
Totally
we'll go
fine.
from there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julie Mermelstein, and I'm Ellie's mother. I've been a PTA president, a legislative chair in a couple different schools, and I have a daughter who works with generalized anxiety to get through her day and dealt with bullying, not only with students, but also with the teachers themselves. I personally went to Yehudi and spoke to her a couple different times about being intense with children, berating them, yelling at them, that sort of thing, and if there was a better way to approach that. Of course, I'm not an authority and can't get programs going. Ellie and I both went to some bullying sessions that the school put forward, and I see someone here who helped facilitate those and talked about how bullying starts at the top and it needs to be worked on. Ellie was bullied by a teacher who had an X of shame that the students were to stand on. And I was told there was nothing that the principal could do about that. So I went and had him change it myself, but with great difficulty. And so I just wanted to let you guys know.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move on to Lel English. Yes? Lath, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, can we set that to 1 minute, 30 seconds, please, Mike? Thank you. Go ahead and start.
I am a student at Odell Middle School. I'm coming here to express my frustration at BSD's decision to disable access to Microsoft Teams chat, and a change which will take effect at the start of winter break. Nearly 2,500 students have already signed a petition on change.org to stop BSD from getting rid of it. To address the issue of distraction in class policy is effective at keeping students out of Teams when it's appropriate. And if class policy isn't good enough, we can work with Microsoft to get in a more granular system that allows teachers to disable chats during class. We have many Microsoft employees in our community that could help develop better teacher controls. In the meantime, class policy served just fine. Hundreds or even thousands of students in BSD use Teams as their only way to communicate with friends. Teams provides an equitable online communication platform for people who can't afford or don't allow third-party communication services. If Teams provides the only way for countless students to communicate with friends, especially if said friends attend different schools, then what are they going to do without it? Many parents can't afford a personal device for their kids to use a third-party communication app on, and many more don't allow their kids to use said apps. Most parents don't want to act as a constant intermediary to facilitate communication between friends. Taking away Teams is taking away an essential mental health lifeline for countless BSD students. BSD might be worried about cyberbullying on Teams. Well, how does BSD moderate real-life bullying? They take in reports from people to counsel bullies on an individual basis. It should work the same way on Teams. Taking away Teams because of cyberbullying is like taking away in-person bullying. Your mission is to serve every student, so don't ignore the thousands of students that rely on Teams. If you could work with Microsoft to develop better teacher controls and put together a workable system to combat cyberbullying, that would allow us to keep Teams and everything it provides. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Lauren, Grace, and Danielle as a joint statement. Are you going to have one speaker, or are you going to each try to speak?
We're just going to have one speaker, and we were actually...
Real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Zach Shea. I would like to cede my time to the group ahead of me.
Okay, so I have you together as one. So you're Zach. You're coming later. Okay, no problem. Yeah. So I see Lauren, Grace, and Danielle.
Yeah, so we're moving Grace and Danielle to the point that says Lauren down here, and we're using this point as just mine. So we're just like switching basically.
All right, I just want to know your time. So we're going to give you 1.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So due to recent events of students speaking about their experiences here in BSD, the injustices that many students face on a daily have again been put into the spotlight. Students across the district feel that the current systems and policies we have in place to ensure our right of safety in our learning environments needs to be reviewed. Assuming that you've been keeping up with the press, the bottom line is that a student walked into a school and the systems we have in place to ensure their safety have failed them, and many before them. Whether this be sexual assault, racism, or even homophobia, it's clear that this cycle of harm needs to end, and the solution lies in establishing procedures and policy in restorative justice and accountability. something that our current policies such as HIB lack and therefore fails to achieve. I've immersed myself in equity since day one of walking into Newport High School, and I'm tired. The last time I stepped foot into this space was for the passing of the equity and accountability policy during my freshman year. Little did I know I would be spending my next high school years doing the work of the adults along with my peers in combating the injustices that continue to go unheard. That being said, I'm going to refer to my colleagues and fellow changemakers to elaborate on this concern through their comments that you'll later hear. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Zach. Okay, so Lauren, sorry, I don't really know who's next. Is it Grace and Danielle? Are you ready to go? Okay, thank you. Go ahead and start. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Danielle Kim. I'm a senior at Newport High School. I'm here to ask clarifying questions because we did not know that there was no response beforehand for the overall benefit of the Newport student body.
I'm Grace and I'm a sophomore at Interlake, and I'm also here to ask clarifying questions on behalf of myself and my peers to clarify how to address and make progress regarding sexual assault and harassment in our schools.
You can go ahead and read your questions and we're going to note them, and we will ensure that somebody from our district, just as if you had emailed us or something, that they'll reply to you. Okay, so go ahead and take the time to read your questions. Okay. We won't answer right here, but we will hear your questions.
Thank you. Okay. I'm aware that legal investigation is necessary for those accused of sexual assault, especially if those allegations are reported to school administration. However, how can you ensure that your HIB and sexual assault policy will provide support and safety for those who feel unsafe on campus? That was my first question. And then my second one is, last night on December 1st, Seattle Public School District Board directors stated a new and improved sexual assault policy for April of 2022. How does Bellevue School District plan to implement similar changes for those who are victims of abuse at our schools?
Yeah. And then my question was, how has the Title policy been enforced in the past, and what are the plans to better and more efficiently in the future use Title IX to respond to student protests and reports of sexual assault?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have, I think, Jesse Cassidy. Zach, I understood you gave your time, so if you change your mind and you want to speak at the end and we can, we'll hear you. So right now we have Jesse Cassidy. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jessie Cassidy. As a point of reference, here's a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Bellevue, and I graduated from Newport High School. I'm a parent of 2 BSD students who attend Bennett Elementary School, and I'm also a first-year para educator at a BSD middle school. Growing up in Bellevue, I myself was fortunate to receive 504 supports, as well as support in the areas I was considered gifted. The individualized support and unique approach to learning has positively impacted how I live my everyday life. I am forever grateful for the teachers and the structure that helped to shape my life. Fast forward, when my son was diagnosed with autism at age 2, my husband and I knew we had to find a home in Bellevue. Coincidentally, my husband also grew up in Bellevue, and we both knew it was imperative to bring our child with high needs to a place where resources are abundant and where he would be integrated safely and not marginalized. We believe fully in the mission of inclusion for all students. I'm speaking to you this evening on behalf of the promise we, the school district, have made to our most vulnerable students. Students with IEPs and 504s are legally entitled to the learning accommodations, clear and accurate communication one home, and every support minute that is outlined in their IEP. My son at Bennett is currently receiving that. I am experiencing immense conflict internally and heartbreak as I witness students in the school that I work at now not receive the support and accommodations they desperately need to function in life, let alone moving back into a chaotic transition of in-person learning. I know the school board is here to advocate for the students first. And I would ask you guys as a parent and as a paraeducator and as a lifelong resident that you join me in making that language not just a slogan, but bringing back that reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Kirkpatrick. Okay, all right, so let's move to Cooper Brandy. And then could I have Laura Dodd get ready? Thank you.
Hi, okay, my name is Cooper Branley, and I am one of the 5 expelled students from Newport High School. But today I'm not here to complain or share my frustrations, but instead implore you to ask yourselves what accountability should look like, not only for the admin, but for students as well. I personally suggest the implementation of resources to both victims and the accused of sexual and physical abuse. This can and should vary from case to case, as each story will be different, but examples of these include therapy and mental rehabilitation for either party, resources for legal counsel, and resources for students to learn more in depth the varying degrees of abuse, both sexual and physical. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have Laura Dodd next. Thank you.
Hi, guys. So I'm a parent of a student who goes to Newport High School, and I'm coming to speak to you guys because I think we can do better. I am embarrassed by the way the administration has handled everything going on at that school. She has used fear and intimidation with those students in ways that are just, as I heard the young woman speaking earlier, it really rings clear. My daughter took part in a letter writing campaign in early November to the principal, very nice, asking for her to intervene on behalf of a student who had accused another of physical abuse. She never received a response. The parents didn't receive a response. I know it was hundreds of students who wrote letters, and we did not hear anything. When the protest happened last month, and the way she handled and expelled students who were just holding signs, who were just trying to speak, it is an embarrassment to this city, and it is an abuse of power that needs to be looked into. You guys hire her, you guys are responsible, you guys need to look into this. If this was your daughter going to this school and she was physically abused, and the student and the principal referred to the person who abused her as a victim and did everything she could to underpower her, and then dangled their future in front of them to be able to come back to school, is not the way our administration should act. They should act on behalf of our students. I really appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last commenter is Christine Van Buskirk.
So I'm here to ask for transparency and honesty regarding the canceled SRO program. I'm a parent of a senior at Sammamish High School. I've been a vocal advocate against losing this program because of pressure last year, whatever reason it was for, I've been an advocate for it because of threats that we've had against the school just this week. And what's going on in the world in general. We've had 2 schools around us who were closed for threats. My son left school 2 weeks ago, and when he got to his car and turned it on, our car, it was clear there was a problem. His catalytic converter was stolen. My family already has to scramble to get everywhere to work and school. He often drives me to work and school. It is his way to get to school because there is no bus from our home to get to the school. We can't afford to buy another car. So beyond the fact that it was a huge, pain, it was a lot of money. What was concerning to me is that not only was his catalytic converter stolen, but a teacher's was stolen that day. And after I posted it on a Sammamish parent Facebook page, I was on the down low, told by a bunch of teachers from Newport and other places that this had happened to them too, and that it had not been advertised to parents that this was going on. The worst part about it was there was a switchblade knife left under his truck. And when I tried to get a hold of the principal, both of them at Sammamish High School that are assigned to my son, I got no response within 24 hours. And the only reason I got a response is because I went way above their head over and over and over again, because as you know me, I like to go after them. No one has contacted me. The video doesn't work supposedly. And they can call when my son wears a sweatshirt within 5 minutes that they don't like, but any child could have come in and been stabbed. They have weapons clearly. Beyond the financial problem with this, somebody could have been hurt or worse. And we still haven't really gotten any answers from the school district. So it's another reason to have some sort of transparency within the school that isn't happening.
Thank you. That ends our public comment. I'll give you a minute and a half if you still have something.
I have 2 questions regarding what's your name? No, Mr. English? Lay. What Mr. Lay said, Mr. English, words are hard. Okay, so my first question is, what was the justification for blocking Microsoft Teams use for students starting December 17th? And my second question was, why was the student body informed of this properly via any communication channels other than students who had teachers as parents and were informed of this via a staff email that was then passed along to other students? That is all.
Thank you. Okay, that ends our public comment. At this time, I'm going to suggest that we go to the superintendent update. And then if I have nods from my fellow board members, I'll then suggest we go to our break, which is number 7. And then after that, those 2, we come back and we finish some of the outstanding business before we have our board workshop. So I don't see any objections. So we will move to superintendent update, which is number 4 on our agenda.
Given the time, I'll try to be very brief. First, I'd like to join in the December 2nd recognition of the special education staff and recognize that probably the last 2 years, they have done some of the most amazing work that you could imagine to provide IEPs, to provide instructional service, to provide the personalized education required, and to make that work both virtually and in person this fall to pick up where they did. So on the fortuitous side of this happening to be December 2nd being set as a time to recognize their service, I just want from a superintendent to be able to say how much we appreciate their amazing work by an amazing staff. I'd also like to comment on the protest, the sexual assault protests. Recent days and weeks have seen student protests in Bellevue, as well as any number of Washington school districts and districts throughout the nation. It is part of a national movement in many of the protests. The call has been for more effective response process by schools to allegations or incidents of sexual assault or sexual harassment. There is no simple solution to these concerns, because the required processes and protocols are very significant, both federal and state. The reason behind those processes and protocols is to ensure fair representation for all as the districts investigate any assertions or allegations. Additionally, most people recognize the district's necessity to protect the privacy of the individuals involved, but it does complicate the ability of the district to publicly respond to questions or concerns. That is even further complicated if the individuals involved elect to provide information publicly, knowing full well that the district cannot respond or release the information that they have. My observation is that it reminds me of another place that I served as superintendent, and the question that arose is, what is the public face in the school district for the students? And I pose that to you in the sense of a problem that I would like to broach with my executive team. It really addresses the fact that the school district is seen as a very large bureaucratic entity that largely is difficult. It's not transparent. The processes are difficult, and therefore it's seen as some protective of the district. It is difficult at times to see, from a student perspective, where is their advocacy? What is the face of the district that would represent, whether that be through an ombudsman, whether that be through a director of student life, but particularly looking at a structure that would clearly represent to students and parents, where do they go if there's a question of interfacing with the school district if that is not working. So I will be actively exploring the opportunity to say, how do we put a public face on that students would recognize as a place to go when in fact they're confused by the system or the complexity of the system or trying to get answers. And for that reason, I will be working with my executive staff to say, how could we provide a position or transfer or a change that could improve our way of interfacing with students and recognizing that students need advocacy with our own system. So with that, I would conclude my report to the board tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and, before we take a break, ask if we can consider at this time approving the consent agenda, which is number 3 on our calendar. I'm trying to ensure that we are not going to fall far behind because we do have a very thoughtful workshop that's been planned for tonight. So with that, I'm going to ask, is there any item that somebody wishes to take out of the consent agenda? If not, I will move that we approve the consent agenda.
A second.
Hearing no objection, I'm going to ask all of those in favor of approving the consent agenda. Could you please say aye?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Then the consent agenda is approved. I'm going to ask that we stand with just a 10-minute break until 6:43. Are we back on the record? Okay, so I'm going to propose at this point that we focus on a few things. We have to come back to 2.7, and before we get to that, I'd like to suggest, in the interest of time, that for 2.8 and 2.9, which are the election for our legislative rep and our liaisons, that we carry that over to the first meeting in January. Do I have a second for that?
Sure, second.
Yes.
Okay.
But I thought we had to suspend 1220 and 1221.
I think that can be implied in her motion, and we don't have
Right.
to fully suspend it. Like, the motion itself is a suspension.
Exactly, meaning by carrying it over, we're only suspending it for basically 2 board meetings. And I think it has dual purpose, just for what it's worth. It's really, it would have been relevant anyway to give the new board members more time to learn about liaisons and which ones they really want. But I also think because the vice president question has not been resolved, there might be some things that somebody might have been inclined to take, but wouldn't if they didn't know what else was going on. So for that reason, having the motion seconded, I will now, and no discussion, I will just ask all of those in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries. And I do think we need to address 2.10. We can do one of two things. We can, we have 2 parts to this. We have a motion. We need to consider a motion to accept the nominations for our parent representatives. They are Marissa John and the alternative being Joanne Ishima, who would be representatives to our Disciplinary Appeal Council. They would be serving as essentially the parent volunteer. So I, at this time, would move that we accept the nominations.
Could I ask a question about that?
Please.
So one of the things that we had brought up in the past is making sure that a broad array of parents were invited to apply for that, so that we made sure that we didn't always have parents coming from the same groups of people to take on that role. And so I'd just like to know what was done to ensure that happened, so that we know that it was done before we go voting and approving.
You would have to rewrite policy 3241 in order to do that.
Okay, did I miss something about the policy you want to clarify?
Yeah, I think it says, oh, we can pull it up, but I think it says 1 representative of the PTSA. And then they vote amongst themselves on who that representative would be.
I thought at one point we actually had changed that policy.
All right, well, we
Can
can
we look that up?
Well, I think the bigger thing is it's described in the background in the memo. It says how the district solicited parent representatives district-wide, asked parents to complete a brief application of interest, and that the PTSA council leaders reviewed the letters of interest and they recommended Marissa John. So I think they are complying with the process that's outlined in 3241. And I tend to agree that we may have an opportunity, if we don't like how the policy is written, to revisit it. But from what I could tell when I looked at this, the background summary complies with what's in 3241, and the district summary suggests that they did follow that, meaning they advertised district-wide, they asked interested parents to all fill out the same application, and then they also had the PTSA council do the reviewing, and it was they who recommended Marissa John, with Joanne Ishima as the alternate. So I think that complies with our policy. So I want to just understand from you, Christine, what you believe was not done.
So I didn't say that anything had not been done.
Okay.
I asked for assurance that it had been done, but now having heard what was done, I do have actually further questions. And I am going to go ahead and open up the policy. I am unclear what it means to advertise district-wide. We already know that when we just put out district-wide notices, that they are disproportionately consumed by our population, and that forms are not always approached in the same way. So I just want to understand if we're doing what we, the due diligence that we said we would, and making sure that parents who are chosen to be on that council or any other representative body are truly being drawn from the most broad and diverse group of people that we can. That's all I'm asking.
That Dr. Patty Seaworth, she might be able to tell us how she did that, but I saw it.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I have a point of information to ask too. That's appropriate.
Okay, please.
Yeah, I appreciate and understand the question by Dr. Chu, and I wanted to ask, I'm not sure I heard it correctly. The PTSA made a recommendation, but do the parents have to have been PTSA members or have access to the way they shared the information? Because as we know, not everybody is a PTSA member. I wanted to better understand.
Right now it's hard coded into our policy that it will be one representative of the Parent Student Teacher Association and one or more alternatives. So that means that the leadership of the PTSA gets to designate. It doesn't say that person had to be a member, but probably the person they would designate would be. And it's hard coded in there. So we would have to change this whole policy.
So what I believe we have in front of us is only one question: is was the process that we had complied with? But I think what is being raised is whether there's an opportunity to revisit the policy. And
yeah,
I think
I just checked the policy.
Sure.
And Carolyn's recollection is correct. It does say our one representative of the Parent Teacher Student Association and one or more alternates. And my understanding at some point was we did go back and revisit this particular policy. I think, Carolyn, you're probably on the committee when the last time we updated this, because I certainly wasn't in this category. So it is something that I thought I remember discussing, getting a greater breadth on that. And it looks like for whatever reason, we didn't make a change to that at the time. Maybe we didn't update it. Maybe we just talked about it in the past. And maybe it's time for us to have a deeper discussion about it. Not at this moment,
yeah,
but to put on our calendar for a deeper
I think that makes sense.
discussion.
Do you remember, Christine, just because you probably were here when the policy was revised, it probably has a date. Do you recall if you were one of the people who helped draft it? Do you recall if it came from WASDA, if it was a WASDA model policy?
Its adoption date was in 2012, and its last revision date was in January of 2020. So I was not on the committee that would have done this revision at that time. So I don't know if that was Erica, Francine, or Carolyn, but that was the SIFE group. Yeah, so it's probably them. So anyway, I think we might have had the discussion, but we didn't, clearly didn't.
Maybe we can have Mr. Harrison, if you could maybe make a note that perhaps the DAC policy is something we could revisit in terms of how it's essentially limited through its current writing to the PTSA, and maybe we can find a way to revisit that so it's frankly broader.
We will bring that to you.
Okay, so I don't know if at this time, would you like to hear from Patty, or are we?
About the advertising.
If she has more info to give us, I don't know,
Okay.
Joyce, I would like to.
I'm going to just keep it limited because we are quite late in terms of where we're supposed to be. So I just want to let people know we're about an hour and a half behind schedule. So I just want to let people know we do have work to do, including finalizing our VP vote, as well as a study session. So with that, could we maybe have just a minute from Dr. Seaworth? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, that's correct. It has not been updated, and it was voiced by the board that it would be important to try to solicit varied perspectives and diverse perspectives. Thus, this year, we did put in letter of interest. It was a very, very brief piece out on our district website in October. And we received some feedback from the PTSA that they actually identify the folks. We worked with PTSA to at least share with them the letters of interest we had, from which they considered and identified their reps. So for a varied process, we would welcome adjustments to the policy for sure. I would say this was the first year that we did put it up on the website and solicit letters to try to get other parents. And we had a more comprehensive plan to reach out to varied groups and then began engaging with the PTSA.
Yeah, for the record, it does say representative of the PTSA, so they really felt that it needed to be someone they chose because they didn't want the district picking their representative, which makes sense to me, but that's as the policy is currently written.
Okay, so I think generally agree that we have a opportunity to improve this policy, and it's going to be, I would just look to the superintendent to consider a proposal that we can then review, but I think we will have our own ideas of how to layer on that, essentially knowing that a limited number of our community actually looks at our website. So if we're actually trying to get people who are most likely or who could be marginalized and find themselves in front of the deck, we actually would want a broader representation.
I will try to bring you a proposal in January.
Okay. Okay, so at this time, we have a motion that's been seconded for the nominations of Marissa John and Joanna Shima. And it's been seconded, so at this time, we'll vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the appointment is for a full year?
It is by policy.
Right. Well, it seems that we have an issue here with the diversity of reach that this policy brings out. It seems like we also have a commitment to revisit it. I'm not sure what our other options are. If we don't approve someone, does that mean the person from last year continues until we decide whether or not we want to make a change to the policy? Is that what would happen? I just want to understand.
I think it would happen by default, the same way if we don't get to the vote that we have also to make for you're currently, for example, the DAC representative. If we don't vote that tonight, I think by expectation you would continue in that role, but not officially. So right. It would be my suggestion that we consider that we had a policy. The policy has been published, and it doesn't actually make sense to have gone through this process and have members of our community have put themselves out there and then to essentially say that we are going to change the process halfway through.
So I'm going to go ahead and vote in favor of it because I do agree that we have asked our community members, and I will also say that the current PTSA rep has done an exceptional job in really bringing an open-minded perspective. But it is a place where it is very easy to go down the road of a closed perspective and of just looking at things in terms of black and white with procedure and process, as opposed to right or wrong for kids and good or bad for kids. And while there are constraints and things that are needed to guide it, for me, in my experience finally serving in that role and being called on, because I've been it but not called on in the past, it's a pretty important space. And it is, I think this policy does not do us favors, so.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to hear in the last year you were serving, you felt that the PTSA selected person did a good job, which is good to hear. I think the challenge we have is we're on like the eve of the time that we have this in front of us, and it was not understood as a problem before then. So everybody's gone through a process that has been published and known and advertised. And I think for us to not approve people through a process we created is actually a bigger problem. Having said that, I think because the DAC is actually a pretty time-consuming job, It is not, I mean, I
It
understood.
usually isn't.
Well, I
It
could
usually
foresee this
isn't.
year
Every once in a
possibly
while,
being
there are a
different.
couple of appeals that come up.
I mean, we could always revisit whether, you know, are there other things we can do with representation? Are there other ways that we can enhance it? So we could have overlapping terms. We could have any number of things that we could consider. But I am happy that I believe we've just voted in the two people, Marissa John with Joanna Shima as an alternate. So I think that is.
Although we should
done.
finish the vote.
Yeah.
I don't think we finished the vote.
I thought I had, but let's go again. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I was just going to echo what we've all been talking about, which is that I am voting in favor on the basis of process and that it followed process, but that I also believe that we need to take a look at this and make sure that we understand that there is widespread enough dissemination of the information and that we reach people who have not previously been reached.
I will vote in favor with the hopes that we would revisit this sooner and that we may have an overlapping so we have a more diverse representation. I think I appreciate the process that everybody has gone through, but I think for what we have been striving for, which is equity, that we really need to be expeditious on this process.
So the superintendent's committed to have this for us in January, so we can set this on our agenda for a first reading, perhaps in the first. I think we could for the second meeting in January. But
our current way of doing policy, this would go to what, the SIFE committee for a 3000 series policy and then come for a first and second reading?
Well, why don't I'm going to go ahead and hold that in abeyance. Right now, I think we'll find out from the superintendent when we'll get a first draft, and then we can determine when and how, based on our committee structure and what we have at that time, how we will review the policy. So with that, I think I'm going to turn to.
I will just ask a clarification for the record.
Yeah.
So the motion was approved?
The motion was approved.
Thank you.
And Seema, are we going to appoint the board director tonight, or was that part of the delay? I can't.
That was actually the second half of 2.10, which is you are currently the DAC. I'm the alternative, the alternate. And I think the question is, do you want to continue? Would you like to hold that in abeyance, suspended essentially in terms of you would continue in your role, just kind of as you said, but we would not consider the forthcoming year's appointment until we sort out, along with the other roles, what has been held off till.
I'm happy to keep it for a month. That's fine. And then we'll just sort it all out together with everybody.
Okay, so then I'm going to suggest, and I'll just use unanimous consent, that as to the second half of 2.10, which is the appointment of a board director to DAC, that we hold that until we suspend that appointment until the same time that we resolve the liaison and legislative reps, 1220 and 1221, which I think is scheduled for the first meeting in January, possibly the second meeting in January. Okay, so I see nods. So with that, we will essentially suspend 3241 until the second meeting in January. Okay, so with that, I am going to, at this point, propose that we avail ourselves of the executive session that we previously had scheduled as 2.4, because I did have a chance to consult a little bit with the lawyer and just ask what to do in the case of a 2-2 tie vote. And really the answer is that we need to revote. And I believe at this time, it could be valuable for us to just take a 15-minute break and use our executive session, which actually has a value. We're able to essentially do much of what we would expect to do in our meeting, except we cannot take any kind of straw vote. We can't take it anywhere near an action, but we might be able to just have a conversation about a discussion, an evaluation, an assessment that particularly Joyce, who I think chose to abstain, which is understandable, can perhaps use that time to ask any questions any way that's desired, and then we can come back and try again on the vote. If we end up again with a 2-2 or an abstention, we will figure out what to do. But we do have a board workshop tonight. So I'm going to try to say, let's take that only to 15 minutes, and then we can think of this as part of our board development. Okay, so with that, it is 7:12. Why don't we take a 15-minute recess into executive session? We're going to basically utilize the executive session that was under 2.4, and it is permitted under the RCW that was previously cited. It's RCW 42.30.110, Section 1H, and essentially allows the board to evaluate the qualifications of a candidate for appointment to elected office. So it's not an interview, but it is an opportunity for discussion evaluation. We may simply not come close to any kind of vote. So with that, I think we'll stand in executive session until 7:30 p.m.
You guys are off mic, so I can't hear anybody. I don't know if you can still hear me. Does somebody take me with you someplace?
Okay, we're back on the record. We're going to extend our executive session for another 15 minutes until 8 p.m. Thank you.
So are we starting?
All right, so we are back. Our executive session is done. We are back on the record, and we are continuing with the item we had held in abeyance, which is the nominations and election of vice president by roll call vote. So that's consistent with policy 1210. So at this time, Christine?
Yeah, in listening to the board discussion and seeing the level of discomfort that it's causing in a way that I didn't think was very productive, I'm going to withdraw from that nomination. I'm going to decline the nomination and withdraw. I do think that there are issues that our board has an opportunity to grow into with respect to being uncomfortable about things, and the need to preserve adult harmony over citing the things that are the right things to do for children is dangerous and damaging. And I feel like I've watched multiple votes where things were being approved without anyone questioning or noticing some of the things that should have been called out. And I think that that's why I accepted the nomination. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and find ways to do that in a different space. But I think that we should all think more deeply about how we do things and why we are preserving comfort. We already know from courageous conversations and from other things that discomfort is an essential element of change, and making everyone super comfortable is a nice thing to do, but it doesn't necessarily do the best thing for kids. So that is where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to go ahead and withdraw and try to find a way to ensure these things are taken care of that maybe will be more in keeping with the capacity of the board where we're currently at.
Okay, so with that, let me just ask, we have then one nomination that was seconded. That was for Carolyn. We've had discussion in the board meeting as well as through the executive session that we had under 2.4. At this time, I'm going to ask, unless there's any more discussion, I'm going to ask that we go to a vote and just.
I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
I appreciate, Christine, that you're making this position a change for the harmony, but I do want to echo the fact that I think the discomfort is a good thing. I don't see it as a bad thing. I think difference in ideas, and I thought it would be actually a compliment between both of you. You both have a lot of good positive aspects, which I think could work to get well together. And through that, and maybe a little bit of discomfort, we may even arrive at a better and healthier space. And that's what I was looking at. I understand we want to be working as a unit and be I can't say the word harmonious, but I appreciate that sentiment. But we know that in our diverse community, there's a lot of discomfort, and I think it's good for us to feel that discomfort and grow from it. And so, yeah, I am a little bit disappointed that you're withdrawing, but I understand. But I just felt that I needed to put that 2 cents.
I'm glad you did.
It's not to say that Carolyn is not, capable. It is just that is where I was coming from.
I completely understand. And I will just say, I think it's a good day when we have more people wanting to run for the same position. So it will be 4 years this February that I was on the board. This is the only time I think that I can remember where we actually had kind of contested in a positive way. So I think we're actually getting used to something that I hope will be something we have more of in the future. Our community got to listen to us talking in, I think, honest and transparent ways about differences we have. And I think that's a good thing. And we all, we were kind of talking earlier, like none of our feelings of friendship are going to be changed. I mean, tonight might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but we have a lot of work to do and we will continue to work together. And I think one of the points I think that is important to know is that we all have one vote and we bring it here as board members. So I don't think that changes by president or vice president. So with all of that, if there is no other discussion or no other statements, I would be ready to take a vote. Are there any other statements or discussion points? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and go in reverse alpha order. I'm going to start with Carolyn Watson. Can you say yay or nay on your own nomination?
I'll vote for myself.
Okay, Joyce Shu.
Same. And Seema, if I may correct the last name, I'm Shui.
Shui. Apologize. Yeah, thank you. I actually heard you say that at the visit to Puesta del Sol, and I meant to repeat it properly. So Joyce Shui, and you've affirmed on Carolyn, and for mine, Carolyn, yay. Christine?
No.
Okay. Jane?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so the motion carries, and our vice president will be Carolyn Watson. Okay, so our final action is, and my device is down, so I will just ask if someone, the board secretary, can remind me, we have an agenda to approve for December 16th.
Can we put it on screen?
That's not exactly, I think, the right one. If I knew the number, I would have it. It's the agenda planning. Yeah, it's agenda planning for the December 16th meeting. It has an attachment, which was, yeah.
Yeah, is there an attachment with that can be, okay, awesome, thanks.
Yeah, farther down. I think it's the last. Agenda planning. Yeah, I'm going to try to bring it up, but I know it has an attachment because it has the.
No, this is the attachment.
Oh, okay, there we go. All
I would
right.
like to say there's something missing. A month ago, Carolyn and I did the exercise of what's overdue for the equity commitments be established for the board, the targets for this year be established, and we were asked to do that late, and we took that on, and we did it, and we submitted it almost a month ago now, I think, or at least several weeks ago, and it hasn't come up on any agenda, and I don't understand why it hasn't come up, and I brought it to the attention last time, and again, it's another equity thing that didn't come up on the agenda.
Okay, I will add it to the agenda.
We do have to look those over and vote on them because they are suggestions, I guess, from.
Yeah, it says it will be approved by the board,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure, is there a reason why it didn't come up through agenda planning?
Not that I know of, Christine, and I'm sitting here trying to come up with an answer. So John, can you help me if?
Yeah.
Be on the 12/16 agenda, so it's just an oversight.
So can you just remind me, Christine, so that I can go back and look, was it at last meeting or the meeting before last when?
We were asked like a couple months ago to do the exercise.
Okay,
We did
and
the
it was
exercise, it was submitted to John, and I was told it would go through to agenda planning. I reminded Francine, I assumed that Carolyn being in the agenda planning would take care of it. I also sent a note to John about it, so I'm just not sure how it got missed.
Okay, so we'll make sure it's on next time's agenda. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the current proposed agenda for 1216 with a modification of adding the equity commitments that had been drafted by.
Could we change, instead of doing that, could we consider changing the committee work? Is it just policies that we're bringing up, or is it an opportunity for us to start discussing committees? Because I'm not sure what is anticipated in that timeframe.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think I had thought that maybe that in the committee review, the committee and the policy review, we might be able to have essentially an outtake on where we are at this point and have that be kind of a closeout. So the only challenge is, but I think for every single committee, when I was looking at this before, for GOAL, for SIFE, and for FinOps, we have a board member who's still here who can speak to what was the kind of like the final, what I would call closeout of the status of the work. And I thought that could be a beginning conversation that could help inform where we are, since we have decisions to make between now and our second meeting in January on
So a
those
closeout
committees.
sounds great. The other thing that's missing from this is we still don't have an approved legislative agenda, which was supposed to come up. We're supposed to have an updated draft that was going to be submitted to the board to look at, and then that didn't materialize, and so that hasn't been distributed to the board. And so we'll be going into the legislative session without an approved legislative agenda. We showed
We have a
draft.
GOLCOM meeting tomorrow.
Okay, so, but it's not on the agenda. So
We have a GOLCOM update. So do you have a motion? Would you like to modify this? Because our meeting's tomorrow. We have more than 2 weeks until our next, we have 2 weeks until
no,
our
it
next
says
meeting.
policy review, so I thought those were just for policies. That's why I was asking about it.
Committee
So-
work. So committee work would include our legislative planning.
Right, it just said, it says committee work dash policy review. So that's why I'm asking if it's going to be covered there, that's fine, but we should make sure that that's covered there.
Yeah, I've generally thought committee work and policy review would include both halves of what our committees do. So I think if you're looking for clarification, I don't know we don't usually write out those details in this level of agenda planning, but
I think you've clarified. I was viewing the thing that says committee work dash policy review, that policy review with subheading.
Okay.
And so I thought it was limiting.
Okay. So when we have the update from GOLCOM, we'll be able to have that in mind tomorrow when we meet.
Great, perfect, thank you.
So I'm going to go back just to the modified motion. The motion would be to amend our current agenda to include the equity commitments that had been proposed and the equity commitments that were drafted and submitted by Carolyn and Christine. So those would be added to the agenda. I would probably propose that I add them as item 8.4 in lieu of executive committee update, because I don't know that we will actually have something from executive committee. But for now, actually, let me just strike that. Let me modify this. I will propose that I move that we approve this agenda with a modification of adding as 8.5, the equity commitments that had been drafted by Christine and Carolyn. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Second.
You've got 2 seconds, so I guess you got a second and a third.
Okay,
Before we vote on it, just also on 9.1, could we make sure that that includes some time for discussion of the liaison positions, so that when we do have to decide, that it gives folks a chance to have had a conversation together about those things?
Yeah, I think that is kind of the whole, like, the proposal I was going to have is that we use these sort of broader rubrics of 8 and 9, which basically are covering topics that maybe were drafted on the assumption that maybe tonight we would make our liaison and committee assignments, but we've held that in abeyance, that we kind of repurpose that for the discussion points that we need to have. So it can be updates, but in the conversation, it can actually be informative for the incoming board members as to not just an update, but what does that liaisonship look like? So I don't think I need to modify the existing agenda or modify the existing motion, but if you think I
Nope,
do.
I just asked if we could use that time.
Sure. So I'm going to just say, let's take a vote. All those in favor of accepting this agenda with the modification I made? Say aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. So with that, I think we've concluded our business and we adjourn tonight. Thank you.